Listen closely, for this is no ordinary tale of love and betrayal. This is a story of fortunes won and lost, of secrets concealed behind polished smiles, and of a man who vanished at the very moment his pregnant wife needed him most. While he jetted off to Paris with his mistress, indulging in champagne by the Eiffel Tower, his wife was left alone in a hospital room, labor pains tearing at her with every breath. Before he could save her, his romantic getaway fate took its toll. An unexpected social media post, two newborns wrapped in blankets clutching a single piece of paper, brought his entire empire crashing down. Daniel Parker was never an ordinary man. He grew up in Chicago in a well-to-do family that prided itself on luxurious living and proud old money traditions. He attended every prestigious summer camp, was on the advanced chess team in high school, and later graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in finance. People around him often said he was destined for greatness. It was as though success had been woven into his DNA, passed down from his banker father and philanthropic mother. But Daniel's greatest pride was not his inherited wealth or the brand-new sports cars he drove each year. His real pride came from the business he built from scratch, Parker Capital Ventures. By the age of 32, Daniel was already recognized as one of Chicago's most ambitious investors, often featured in financial magazines. He was a regular presence at high-profile charity galas, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Bill Ackman and Ken Griffin, real Wall Street legends, forging the sense that he was walking among giants and sometimes walking over others. At 28, Daniel married a woman named Alicia Morgan, a bright-eyed artist from Boston who had moved to Chicago after graduating from the Rhode Island School of Design. Alicia's creative perspective balanced Daniel's number-crunching mind perfectly. They met at an art exhibition in Millennium Park, where Alicia's paintings of surreal cityscapes caught Daniel's attention. Their relationship was a whirlwind romance. Morning coffees turned into late-night strolls by the lake, culminating in a lavish wedding at the historic Drake Hotel. She brought warmth and color into his black-and-white business world. He adored her vibrant spirit. She admired his tenacity and drive. The early years of their marriage were a golden dream. Alicia's art studio thrived with customers. Daniel's business soared, and they both traveled across Europe and Asia for leisure. Their social media accounts were filled with snapshots from Santorini sunsets to Tokyo's neon-lit streets. Friends envied their seemingly perfect union, but beneath the polished exterior, cracks were forming. Daniel's obsession with expanding Parker Capital Ventures began to overshadow everything. Late nights at the office replaced romantic dinners, and Alicia's once lively conversation became stifled by Daniel's repeated excuses. It was only a matter of time before the longing for affection found a dangerous outlet. Alicia's pregnancy came as a gift. She had been hoping for children for 2 years, and after a doctor's visit, she discovered she was carrying twins. Suddenly, she felt a new sense of hope, believing that children would bring Daniel closer again, bridging the distance between them. For a while, that seemed to be the case. Daniel was proud, telling everyone from his board of directors to the barista at his favorite coffee shop that he would soon be a father of 2. Even the brand of baby clothing and strollers became a minor obsession, as Daniel wanted the absolute best for his children. But as Alicia's belly grew and her energy waned, Daniel's presence at home became sporadic. He claimed it was a critical juncture for his firm. His portfolio was expanding. New deals were on the table, and his investors were expecting constant updates. His phone never stopped buzzing. He started spending nights in the office under the pretense of late-night meetings with international clients. Unknown to Alicia, though these nights were often spent at a luxurious high-rise condominium with a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, where he was not alone. Her name was Celeste Dupont, originally from Marseille, France. She had moved to Chicago 2 years prior to work for a modeling agency. When she crossed paths with Daniel at a fundraising event hosted by the Philanthropic Circle that included real names like Pritzker and Crown Celeste, quickly caught Daniel's eye. Statuesque, raven-haired, and possessing an elegant accent, Celeste exuded a certain mystique. Daniel's admiration soon shifted to flirtation, and within weeks, flirtation spiraled into a full-blown affair. At first, Celeste was just a secret indulgence. Daniel's well-practiced charm flattered her, his expensive gifts dazzled her, and his connections to Chicago's elites promised her glamorous opportunities. She thought it harmless, a fleeting romance with a wealthy man. But as months went by, she became more ambitious. She recognized Daniel's desperation for novelty, his restlessness in a dull marriage. She tapped into that dissatisfaction, slowly encouraging him to spend more time and money on her. Over candlelit dinners, in Michelin-starred restaurants, Celeste laid out the fantasy of freedom and passion he was missing at home. She never spoke of Alicia, and Daniel never bothered to mention the pregnancy. In Celeste's world, there was only the two of them. Alicia was no fool. While her initial focus had been on painting a new series of canvases dedicated to impending motherhood, she gradually felt something shift in Daniel's behavior. The subtle changes first manifested in his cologne, a lingering scent of perfume on his suit jacket. Other times, he would come home late with no logical explanation, or his phone would ring incessantly with calls he refused to answer in front of her. She tried ignoring it, convincing herself it was just business stress. She told herself that Daniel was under immense pressure, especially now with twins on the way. But Alicia's intuition refused to be silenced. At 7 months pregnant, she rummaged through their closet, cleaning out space for baby supplies. That was when she discovered receipts for women's clothing far too small to be for her, and extravagant jewelry she had never seen Daniel gift her. Her heart pounded as she pieced the puzzle together. The hush-money dinners, the overnight absences, the forced smiles that never reached his eyes. Daniel was having an affair. Her first instinct was shock. She felt rage churn in her stomach, but it was drowned by sorrow. Pregnant with twins, dealing with swollen ankles, back pain, and the emotional roller coaster of pregnancy hormones, Alicia felt abandoned and deeply hurt, yet she kept her composure. Instead of confronting Daniel outright, she decided to gather more information. She reached out to her cousin Maria, who worked at a private investigations firm in Seattle. While Maria couldn't personally investigate in Chicago, she guided Alicia on basic ways to track suspicious behavior. Alicia began documenting Daniel's comings and goings, checking his credit card statements, and even snooping through his phone. Each discovery confirmed her worst fears. By the time Alicia had compiled enough evidence to confirm the affair, Celeste had already begun making demands on Daniel, demands that surpassed the occasional European vacation or showy gift. She wanted something big, something that would set her apart from all of Daniel's usual corporate acquaintances. She wanted a trip to Paris, her homeland, but not just any trip, a whirlwind romantic getaway, complete with 5-star hotels, private tours of the Louvre, and first-class flights. Daniel, high on the dopamine rush of this reckless relationship, found himself promising her exactly that. Yet he hesitated, because Alicia's due date was just around the corner. Whenever Celeste mentioned the idea of going to Paris in the coming weeks, Daniel would stammer excuses. He tried to tell her it was a busy season, at work, or there were some complications at home. But Celeste was cunning. She saw right through his half-hearted reluctance. Aware that Alicia's pregnancy was near its end, Celeste realized that if she didn't take control, Daniel might never fulfill his promise. He was, after all, still a married man, soon to be a father of twins. So she pushed with the precision of a seasoned manipulator. If Daniel refused to go, Celeste threatened to expose their affair, sending him cryptic messages that hinted at forwarding photos of them together to certain concerned parties. She had amassed enough photographic evidence, voice recordings, and text messages to make Daniel's life a living nightmare. In short, she blackmailed him into the trip, Daniel pinned against the wall by the fear of scandal, and the thrill of ongoing temptation finally caved. They scheduled a departure flight to Paris for May 15th, just 1 week before Alicia's scheduled C-section on May 22nd. Everything might have remained a well-guarded secret if Alicia's pregnancy had adhered to the predicted schedule, but life rarely goes according to plan. On May 14th, Alicia began to experience intense contractions a full week before the doctor's planned date. While Daniel prepared for his flight the next morning, packing designer suits into a sleek silver suitcase at their penthouse, Alicia was alone in the nursery, curled up on the rocking chair, feeling cramps that steadily intensified. She tried calling him, but Daniel's phone was on silent. He was busy talking to Celeste, making final arrangements actually on a separate phone line that Alicia didn't even know existed. By midnight, Alicia's water broke. Alarmed, she dialed 911, tears streaming down her cheeks, a tumult of fear, betrayal, and physical pain colliding in her mind. An ambulance whisked her off to Mount Sinai Hospital in downtown Chicago. Panicked hospital staff admitted her, immediately hooking her up to monitors to track the twins' heartbeats. Meanwhile, Daniel was sipping cognac in the private lounge at O'Hare International Airport. Celeste had convinced him to arrive early for their flight to ensure they had time to relax before the long trip. He only noticed Alicia's numerous missed calls after Celeste had dozed off her head, leaning on his shoulder. By then, Alicia had already been in labor for 3 hours, and Daniel was too far entrenched in his own mess to realize it was an emergency. He rationalized that Alicia was merely calling to check on him or remind him of some mundane household detail. It was only moments before boarding that a frantic voicemail from Alicia finally played in Daniel's ear. "Daniel, I'm at the hospital. The babies, please come. I'm scared." His face turned ashen. In that instant, a war raged within him. Logic and moral duty dictated he should run to his wife's side. Selfishness, lust, and fear of Celeste's blackmail shackled him to a promise he had made. In a choice he would forever regret, he turned off his phone and boarded the plane. Alicia's labor was complicated but successful. By the time the sun rose over the Chicago skyline, she had given birth to 2 healthy boys, though the process had taxed her body severely. Painkillers clouded her senses, but her heartbreak was sharper than ever. With shaky hands, she asked the nurse if her husband had arrived. The nurse, face soft with concern, explained that there was no one in the waiting room for her. Alicia felt crushed. She had never imagined Daniel would abandon her at this moment. The heartbreak felt like a physical wound, impossible to ignore, even amid the joy of motherhood. Her mother, Linda Morgan, flew in from Boston as soon as she received the hospital's call. Seeing Alicia so fragile, Linda offered what comfort she could. But Alicia's bitterness was palpable. She had decided that if Daniel could betray her at such a critical moment, she would not shield him from the consequences anymore. As she cradled her newborn sons, whom she named Oliver and Isaac, an idea began to form in her mind. Alicia recalled the legal documents Daniel once asked her to keep safe in their home office. Among them was the deed to Parker Capital Ventures, the controlling share agreement he had drawn up when he initially launched the company. It was a symbolic and legally significant document representing Daniel's ownership stake. If Alicia posted a public image of their newborn twins holding that deed, it would send a message, both personal and professional. By connecting the family moment to his business in such a public way, she'd thrust Daniel's infidelity into the spotlight he so dearly tried to control. Still in the hospital, Alicia reached for her phone. Her hands trembled not only from the effects of the IV drips, but from the adrenaline surge of righteous anger. She called Maria, her cousin, and explained her plan. Maria, worried for Alicia's emotional state, asked if she was sure she wanted to incite a public scandal. Alicia responded firmly that she had been hurt too deeply to remain silent. If Daniel thought he could discard her and the twins for a romantic escapade, he was sorely mistaken. With Maria's help, Alicia prepared the perfect social media post. She had already taken a photo earlier, a tender snapshot of Oliver and Isaac, each swaddled in a pale blue blanket, lying side by side with the Parker Capital Ventures deed placed near their tiny hands. The photo was innocent, yet potent, an unmistakable emblem of Daniel's responsibilities as a father and a business owner. Alicia typed a caption that read, "Welcome to the world, Oliver and Isaac Parker. While your father is off in Paris on business, we want to let him know that we hold his most prized possession in our hands, his legacy and our future. Hashtag family first at Parker Twins. Love should always so first." The moment she hit share, the post went live on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Within an hour, Alicia's phone buzzed non-stop with messages of shock, support, and outrage. Friends who had been clueless about Daniel's affair, old classmates, business associates, everyone was tagged or forwarded the post. It spread beyond her immediate network, quickly garnering thousands of reactions. Local Chicago bloggers picked up on the drama, and soon it reached the trending tab, overshadowing Daniel's carefully cultivated corporate image. While Daniel and Celeste were flying over the Atlantic, oblivious to the chaos brewing below, Alicia's post was turning into a viral phenomenon. When Daniel landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, he turned on his phone to a barrage of notifications that nearly crashed his system. He noticed calls from his mother, Linda Morgan, his best friend, Robert Harding, and countless texts from business colleagues. His heart pounded as he read messages demanding to know if the viral post was real. Others condemned him for his absence during his wife's labor. Some even threatened to withdraw their investments from Parker Capital Ventures if the scandal tarnished the firm's reputation further. Celeste, initially thrilled to touch down in her homeland, was soon faced with a frantic, panic-stricken Daniel. He sank into one of the plush seats in the airport lounge, scrolling feverishly through social media. There it was, the picture of his newborn twins, only hours old, with that deed. The caption was a scorching indictment of his failure as a husband and father. He felt a cold sweat grip him, and the weight of his decision crashed upon his shoulders. Celeste tried to comfort him, but Daniel pushed her hand away, his mind spinning with how to contain the damage. He called Alicia, but she refused to answer. He called Linda Morgan, who berated him the moment she picked up, calling him a disgrace. He tried to explain himself, stuttering excuses about urgent business matters, but Linda would have none of it. "Your wife just delivered twins alone," she snapped, "and the entire city knows you chose to be with your mistress." How do you think that looks? Daniel swallowed hard, realizing that he had no immediate solution to this mess. Panic coursed through his veins as he realized that the scandal was not just personal, it threatened his entire life's work. For the next 2 days, Daniel struggled to perform the balancing act of damage control from a Paris hotel suite. He spent hours on conference calls with his board of directors. Stocks for Parker Capital Ventures hadn't yet plummeted, but rumors circulated about a possible investor revolt. Clients who once saw Daniel as a financial prodigy now worried about his judgment and stability. The press seized upon the sensational story Chicago CEO misses birth of twins for Paris rendezvous. Even the local news stations got in on it, with anchors raising eyebrows at the scandal's salacious details. Meanwhile, Celeste's excitement about touring the city of love vanished as Daniel spiraled. He cancelled romantic dinners and postponed sightseeing. He was constantly glued to his phone, scouring news articles and responding to outraged emails. Celeste tried to reason with him, but each time she opened her mouth, Daniel reminded her that her threats and manipulations had led to this moment. The tension between them grew toxic. Their once thrilling affair was now a suffocating noose around both their necks. Desperate to protect his reputation, Daniel contemplated cutting the trip short. But Celeste threw a fit at the prospect of losing out on her dream vacation, accusing him of caring only about his public image and never about her. Ironically, she was partly right. Daniel had lost sight of everything but his immediate need to salvage his business. And still, at the back of his mind, the image of his newborn twins clutched him with guilt. He felt powerless and trapped in a foreign city, unwilling to risk an ugly scene at the airport if Celeste decided to retaliate by exposing him to the press even further. Back in Chicago, Alicia was recovering. The twins Oliver and Isaac were healthy, but required the usual intense care of newborns. Alicia had to juggle feeding schedules, diaper changes, and her own postpartum recovery. Yet she refused to collapse under the weight of her circumstances. She drew strength from the outpouring of support on social media, even as she fielded invasive questions from curious reporters. She blocked calls from Daniel's board members asking her to delete the post. She refused to answer any messages from Daniel's allies who, in thinly veiled threats, warned her that humiliating Daniel could lead to dire financial consequences for her and the twins. Alicia stood her ground. She had the moral high ground, and she was determined to keep it. She hired a lawyer, Caroline Henderson, an old friend from college, who had successfully handled high-stakes divorce cases. Caroline assured Alicia that she could fight for child support custody and a portion of Daniel's assets if it came down to it. Given Daniel's glaring negligence, the law would likely be on Alicia's side. Despite the swirl of hostility, Alicia experienced moments of pure joy with her babies. Holding Oliver and Isaac in her arms, she felt a fierce, protective love overshadowing all else. She promised them that she would never let them feel unwanted or unloved. Their innocent eyes gave her courage. She channeled her emotions into writing a personal statement, clarifying her decision to go public. She posted it on social media. This was never about vengeance. It's about accountability. My children deserve a father who cares. And if Daniel Parker can't show up at the hospital, then let the world see where his priorities lie. I won't be silenced, and neither will Oliver and Isaac. Thank you to everyone who has shown us love and support. Under pressure from his board of directors, Daniel arranged a hasty press conference at a small venue near the Champs-Élysées, hoping to put rumors to rest. It was a surreal scene, a Chicago businessman flanked by a Paris skyline, addressing a scandal that had gripped online audiences across continents. Celeste was nowhere to be seen at the conference, but cameras flashed as Daniel stood before a podium attempting to appear composed. He began by thanking everyone for their concerns and apologized for any distress caused by miscommunication between him and his family. He claimed he had been on a vital business trip that unfortunately coincided with the early birth of his children. Daniel's carefully worded statement even hinted at private matters he would address upon returning to the States. But the journalists wouldn't let him off so easily. Their questions cut like knives. Is it true you were traveling with your mistress? Why did your wife have to deliver alone? Do you have any comment on the leaked photos of you and Ms. Dupont at a Chicago penthouse? Daniel's attempt at damage control fell apart. He stammered half denials, refused to comment on personal questions, and ended the conference abruptly. Within minutes, media outlets published scathing articles describing his performance as evasive, raising more suspicion about the seriousness of his situation. The fiasco only added fuel to the raging fire in Chicago, where Alicia's post continued gaining traction. Daniel realized with sinking dread that only a direct confrontation at home could quell this storm. Days later, Daniel booked a return flight to Chicago, leaving Celeste behind in Paris. She lashed out in the hotel suite, smashing a vase and hurling insults. He tried to appease her with promises of future reconciliation and financial support, but she saw through it. It was clear that Daniel was in survival mode, and that meant discarding any excess baggage, including Celeste. As the taxi pulled away from the hotel, Daniel watched Celeste from the back seat. She stood on the sidewalk in her designer dress, fury in her eyes, understanding that her leverage was weakening now that the public scandal had already exploded. The flight back was agonizing. Daniel felt an ocean of dread. His affair was public knowledge, his children were born without him, and the entire city he once commanded was disillusioned. Investors demanded a restructuring meeting, friends ghosted him, and even his own mother refused to speak to him after Linda Morgan had unleashed her anger. He thought about the day he first met Alicia, how he was captivated by her paintings. Then he thought about Oliver and Isaac, his flesh and blood, and the moment he chose not to be there for them. The shame was suffocating. When he landed at O'Hare, the media presence was overwhelming. Dozens of reporters awaited his arrival. He attempted a discreet exit through a side gate, but paparazzi still managed to corner him, snapping photos and shouting questions. Security finally escorted him to a private car that whisked him away. As the city lights blurred past the tinted windows, Daniel's mind replayed every mistake he had made. He directed the driver to his penthouse, aware he couldn't just walk into Alicia's home unannounced, especially after the fiasco he'd caused. Upon arriving at the penthouse, Daniel found his mother, Linda Morgan, waiting in the living room. She was not a woman easily intimidated. Her philanthropic background had exposed her to both the best and worst in people. The moment Daniel stepped through the door, Linda's eyes narrowed. She gave him a look of such profound disappointment that he wished he could vanish. "How dare you show your face here?" she began, standing up from the couch. "Alicia is at her mother's condo. She took the babies with her, and you've got no one but yourself to blame." Daniel tried to mutter an apology, but Linda cut him off. "No, you listen. I held those babies in my arms when they were born. I watched Alicia go through labor, alone, while you were gallivanting in Paris. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for her?" For our family, Daniel remained silent, his head bowed. Linda continued, The least you can do is face the consequences head-on. The press is hounding Alicia. She can't even go for a walk without cameras in her face. And she hasn't received a single word from you. No apology, no explanation. He tried to explain about Celeste's threats, the blackmail, his fear of losing everything if he didn't comply. Linda's expression twisted with disgust. Your fear of losing everything. You lost everything the moment you chose another woman over your family. Don't expect sympathy from me. If you want any chance of seeing your sons, you'll have to earn it. The next day, Daniel attended a crucial meeting at Parker Capital Ventures. The board of directors was torn between personal loyalty to Daniel and safeguarding the company's future. Investors were jittery, and rumors suggested some major backers like Charles Moreno of Moreno Holdings were considering divesting. The PR fallout from Daniel's scandal threatened the very stability of the firm. Robert Harding, a longtime friend and COO of Parker Capital Ventures, stood up during the meeting and held nothing back. Daniel, I covered for you as long as I could. But this fiasco is beyond anything we've experienced. We need to reassure our investors, and that might mean stepping down as CEO temporarily to distance the company's image from your personal scandal. Step down, Daniel echoed, his voice almost a whisper. This company had been his lifeblood. He had built it from a small fund into a powerhouse. The thought of relinquishing control was terrifying. Yet the board members nodded solemnly. They recounted the avalanche of negative press, online vitriol, and corporate partners distancing themselves. Daniel realized that they were right. If he stayed on, the brand might never recover. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed to a temporary leave of absence. He would appoint Robert as interim CEO, while publicly announcing a focus on his family matters. The plan was to buy time for damage control in the hope that the scandal would settle. Despite the heartbreak, Daniel realized it might also be an opportunity to make amends with Alicia and the twins. Perhaps if he could regain her trust, or at least salvage some relationship with his children, his personal life could heal, making a future corporate comeback more plausible. That evening, Daniel decided to visit Alicia at her mother's condo in the suburbs. Clutching a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, he knocked on the door. Linda answered. She eyed the flowers, but made no move to invite him in. Alicia's mother, Nancy Morgan, soon appeared behind Linda, equally stern. Daniel felt as though he were a child who had broken the most important rule, awaiting punishment. "Can I see Alicia?" he asked softly, voice trembling with regret. Linda looked over at Nancy, and after a tense moment, they allowed him inside. The condo was modest compared to the luxurious penthouse he was used to, but it felt warm, filled with family photos and the smell of home-cooked meals. It was a sharp contrast to the cold marble floors of his city residence. Alicia stood in the living room, holding Isaac in her arms, while Oliver slept in a bassinet nearby. She was pale, tired, but her eyes brimmed with a fierce resolve Daniel had never witnessed before. Without waiting for him to speak, she whispered, "They're doing fine. Healthy babies. Not that you bothered to find out." Daniel exhaled, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Alicia, I'm sorry. I know words mean nothing at this point, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I was blinded by stupidity, by vanity, and I hurt you more than I can ever repair." She studied him for a long moment. Then, in a calm tone that belied the anger she must have felt, Alicia said, "Regret doesn't undo what you did. Regret doesn't erase the memory of giving birth alone, or the messages I get every day from strangers discussing my marriage like it's a reality show." Her voice quivered. "I just want to raise my children in peace, without all these cameras, without the shame." Daniel was lost for words. He had no immediate solution for the paparazzi or the social media onslaught, but he offered to finance increased security for her anything she needed. Alicia refused. "I don't want your hush money or your guilt money. If you really mean to help prove it by respecting the legal process I'm about to initiate, I deserve a formal separation, if not a divorce. And the twins deserve formal paternity and support. No more illusions, Daniel." 2 days later, Alicia, with Caroline Henderson's counsel, sent Daniel the initial separation papers. They included demands for monthly child support, a trust fund for Oliver and Isaac, and a clear custody arrangement. Alicia would have primary custody with Daniel allowed supervised visits until the court decided otherwise. It was a blow to Daniel's pride, but he knew he had no grounds to argue. He had lost moral credibility the moment he flew to Paris. Word reached the media that Alicia was filing for legal separation. Many netizens applauded her for standing her ground, calling her a role model for women who endure infidelity. Others speculated that Alicia was a gold digger, though her quiet, philanthropic deeds and successful art career negated that theory. Regardless of the gossip, Alicia stood firm. She was done playing the trophy wife to Daniel's high-flying lifestyle. Meanwhile, Celeste resurfaced. She posted cryptic Instagram stories implying she had vital information about Daniel's business dealings. She claimed to be the victim, stating she had been lied to about Daniel's family situation. Tabloid interviews soon followed, in which Celeste recounted how Daniel had promised her love and a future. Though the public sentiment largely labeled her a homewrecker, some fell for her sob story. Daniel's name was once again dragged through the mud, fueling the tabloid circus. Robert Harding pleaded with Daniel to stop Celeste's media campaign, but Daniel was powerless. Ironically, Celeste's blackmailing potential was weaker now that the affair was already public. At best, he could only wait for her 15 minutes of fame to blow over. As the scandal raged, Parker Capital Ventures faced a tipping point. Investor confidence wavered, and Robert Harding struggled to maintain stability. Several potential deals fell through after negative press. Companies like Redwood Investments and Langley Associates cited the fiasco as a risk factor. Desperate to preserve the company's future, Daniel, still majority shareholder, approved a series of cost-cutting measures and personally offered to inject more capital. It stung to part with a chunk of his personal fortune he once used to woo Celeste, but it was essential to prove Parker Capital Ventures could weather the storm. A shareholders' meeting convened downtown. On the agenda, whether Daniel's removal as CEO should become permanent. Daniel attended, flanked by Robert and legal counsel. He admitted his personal failings, but insisted he could still lead the company once the crisis abated. The atmosphere was tense. Though some shareholders were eager to move on, without Daniel, others recognized that his business acumen had for years guided the firm to exponential growth. After hours of debate, they decided to keep Daniel as a shareholder but maintain Robert Harding as CEO until a further review in 6 months. The compromise was far from ideal for Daniel, but it was better than outright removal. Despite the upheaval, Daniel's paternal instincts finally emerged. He arranged with Alicia to see the twins during scheduled visits, supervised by either Linda or Nancy Morgan. The first time he held Oliver in his arms, the baby blinked up at him with big, curious eyes. Isaac was asleep, swaddled in Alicia's arms. The weight of fatherhood struck Daniel with a depth of emotion he hadn't anticipated. He remembered Alicia's post, the heartbreak behind it, and he silently vowed never to fail them like this again. Alicia kept her distance. Her posture was rigid whenever Daniel was around. She allowed him to feed the babies their bottles, but kept conversation minimal, focusing only on what was necessary for the twins' welfare. Once, as Daniel gently rocked Isaac, he tried to apologize again. Alicia exhaled, burying her face in her hands. "You can't undo it. I wish you could, but you can't. The best you can do is be a good father now. That's all I want." Although she remained guarded, Alicia wasn't cruel. She saw Daniel's genuine remorse, but the scars ran deep. She had no illusions that forgiveness would arrive overnight. When he left, she watched him go, feeling a cocktail of anger, hurt, and a flicker of pity. Back in Paris, Celeste Johnson's stories took a turn. She claimed Daniel had coerced her with promises of marriage if she got pregnant. She subtly hinted she might be expecting. The tabloids ate it up. To quell more rumors, Daniel did a paternity test through a private French clinic when Celeste insisted she was pregnant. The test results, weeks later, revealed she was not pregnant. It had been a lie, presumably, to cling to the last shreds of fame and possible financial gain. Her deception exposed Celeste's media attention plummeted. She found herself blacklisted in certain modeling circles as agencies detested scandal overshadowing their brand. Alone, and without Daniel's financial safety net, she faded from the limelight, occasionally popping up in tabloids for drunken altercations or bizarre claims. The mistress who once enthralled Daniel had become a tragic figure, undone by her own manipulations. Daniel felt a twisted sense of relief, tempered by guilt for having ever been involved with her. Interestingly, as Celeste's manipulations came to light, public sympathy shifted slightly in Daniel's favor. While few absolved him of abandoning Alicia, many recognized that Celeste had exploited the situation for personal gain. Some even argued that her blackmail attempts had cornered Daniel. Online discussions became more nuanced, with a portion of netizens acknowledging that Daniel might have been manipulated. But this did little to ease Alicia's pain or the fact that Daniel had still made that fateful choice to board the plane. Daniel welcomed any respite from negative press, hoping it might help him re-establish a measure of stability at Parker Capital Ventures. Slowly, potential clients returned, lured by the company's proven track record. The stock price began a modest recovery. Robert Harding, as interim CEO, proved efficient, and Daniel worked behind the scenes, free from the public eye. Amidst these slow improvements, a crisis hit that no one anticipated. Alicia's father, Marcus Morgan, suffered a stroke. Doctors quickly operated, but his condition was critical. Alicia spent long nights at the hospital, refusing to leave his side. In these dire moments, Daniel stepped up in a way she never expected. He quietly arranged for the best neurologists from Rush University Medical Center to consult on Marcus's case. He also covered any medical expenses without making a fuss about it. Alicia found him in the waiting room one evening, pacing anxiously. It struck her how different he looked. Hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He offered her coffee. She accepted. In that hushed corridor, they talked not about affairs or business, but about life and mortality. Alicia confided her fears of losing her father, how she'd always been Daddy's girl, how he had supported her art from day one. Daniel listened genuinely, no longer the arrogant mogul, but a humbled man. When Marcus stabilized, Alicia allowed Daniel to visit him. Though Marcus was weak and barely able to speak, he recognized Daniel. He squeezed Daniel's hand, managing a faint nod that Alicia interpreted as a gesture of gratitude for helping save his life. In that hospital room, something shifted. Alicia saw a side of Daniel She had long forgotten the caring, earnest young man she first fell in love with. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but a door she had slammed shut opened just a crack. Over the subsequent weeks, Daniel immersed himself in family life, driving Alicia and her mother to the hospital, helping care for Oliver and Isaac, and even assisting Alicia in errands for her art studio, which she was determined not to neglect despite everything. The paparazzi found less scandal to exploit. They snapped pictures of Daniel carrying diaper bags, picking up groceries, or quietly sitting in the hospital waiting room. New narratives emerged. Daniel Parker, the father who nearly lost it all, tries to rebuild. Alicia noticed his efforts. She remained cautious, but her fury softened into a guarded hope. Perhaps Daniel truly wanted to atone. Late one night after returning from the hospital, she found him in the condo's living room, exhausted from rocking Isaac to sleep. He looked up at her, a question in his gaze. She approached quietly. For a moment, they simply existed together, parents of two beautiful children, children who needed both a mother and a father. Alicia reached out, brushed Daniel's hair aside, and whispered, "Thank you for being here." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. He realized this was the first sign of warmth she had shown him since the scandal. It was the briefest moment, but it carried a profound meaning. He gently took her hand, kissing her fingertips. She didn't pull away immediately. However, the weight of his betrayal still hung heavy in the air, reminding both that trust is fragile. The evening was still, the sky over Chicago, painted in hues of deep navy and gold. Stars blinked into view one by one, as though cautiously watching from above. Alicia stood on the narrow balcony of her mother's condo, wrapped in a light shawl, the city humming beneath her feet. The boys were asleep. Inside, her mother and Linda quietly washed bottles and tidied toys. Daniel joined her a moment later, stepping out into the cool air with a cup of tea in his hands. He didn't speak at first. Neither did she. They stood side by side, watching cars pass in the distance, their unspoken thoughts weaving between them like invisible threads. Finally, Alicia turned to him, her voice steady but low. "We need to talk about what comes next." Daniel met her gaze, bracing himself. "I'm not saying I'm ready to forgive," she continued, "but I'm also not ready to tear everything apart just for the sake of closure. The twins deserve parents who at least try, who don't use their pain as an excuse to stop trying." He nodded, not daring to interrupt. "That post I made," Alicia said, her eyes now trained on the streetlights below, "with Oliver and Isaac holding your company deed. It wasn't just about calling you out. It was to remind you what you were gambling with: your family, your future, our sons." Daniel looked down at the teacup in his hands. "I know. It worked. I haven't stopped thinking about that image since." She glanced over at him, her tone softening, but not her resolve. "We can try, but if we do, it won't be on your terms anymore. There will be boundaries and complete transparency." "You'll have it," he said quickly. "Whatever you need. I don't want to be the man I was. Not ever again." "I'll need time," she said. "We'll need counseling. And you'll need to keep up your end of everything: support for the twins, accountability, no more secrets. Not one." "I'm committed," Daniel said. "To the boys, to this process, and to you if you'll let me earn my way back." Alicia studied his face. He looked older now, not just in years, but in weariness, but also in truth. There was something steadier in him, something that hadn't been there during the height of his charm and ambition. Inside, a faint whimper came from the twins' room. Daniel instinctively turned, but Alicia gently touched his arm. "I've got it," she said, "but thank you." He nodded, letting her pass, and stood alone on the balcony, as the door closed softly behind her. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was real. Honest. And that was more than they'd had in a long, long time. Healing is never linear. Alicia had learned that the hard way. Some days she felt like she could breathe again, watching the twins giggle in their high chairs, feeling pride as she hung a new painting in her revived studio. But other days, memories gripped her like ice around the ribs. She'd suddenly remember the hospital room, the silence of labor without Daniel, and that crushing moment she realized he had chosen someone else during the most vulnerable chapter of their lives. And yet she hadn't collapsed. Instead, she chose to rebuild. It started slowly. She agreed to meet Daniel for coffee at a neutral cafe near her mother's condo. They didn't talk about the past, not at first. Instead, they talked about the boys, how Oliver had started babbling dada, how Isaac clapped at the sound of music. Daniel listened intently, nodding, smiling, but also visibly holding back emotion. She could see it, the shame, the longing, the gratitude for simply being invited to witness his children's lives. At the advice of their therapists, they resumed couples counseling. The sessions were raw. Alicia didn't hold back. She described the humiliation, the pain of reading Celeste's interviews, the betrayal of waking up postpartum to tabloids dissecting her marriage. Daniel took it, every word. He didn't deflect, he didn't excuse. He just listened, really listened, for the first time in years. I wasn't just grieving the affair, Alicia told him one day. I was grieving the man I thought I married, the man who would have never left me in that room alone. Daniel swallowed, hard eyes rimmed red. I grieve him too, because I don't know when I stop being him. They sat in that quiet for a long time, the silence saying everything words couldn't. Outside of therapy, Daniel stepped up. He never missed a pediatric appointment, never complained when Alicia called him at 2 a.m. because one of the twins wouldn't sleep. He stocked her fridge when she was too tired to shop. He showed up, reliably, humbly, silently, doing the work. In the press, the scandal was finally dying down. Celeste had retreated into obscurity after the paternity lie was exposed. The headlines had moved on, but Alicia knew the real story hadn't ended. With the media's silence, it lived in their day-to-day choices now. She didn't trust easily, but she observed carefully. And slowly, piece by piece, Daniel was earning space in her life again, not with promises, but with presence. One morning, while feeding Isaac his bottle, Alicia looked over at Daniel, who was rocking Oliver to sleep. A calm warmth settled in her chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the start of something honest. And after everything that mattered more. Nearly a year had passed since Daniel's betrayal detonated their carefully curated life. And in that time, Alicia had become someone new. Not harder, not bitter, just stronger. The scars were still there. Some days she'd wake up and feel them like bruises, tender reminders of what she'd survived. But on most mornings now, it wasn't pain that greeted her first, it was purpose. This morning was one of those. The air in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, was crisp, scented with pine and the distant smoke of lakeside cabins. Alicia stood by the porch, watching Oliver and Isaac wobble across the grass with their toy buckets, chasing ducks and laughing uncontrollably. Nearby, Daniel crouched beside them, his hands steadying Oliver, his voice patient and warm. This quiet moment was a miracle. Alicia wrapped her cardigan tighter and joined them. When Daniel looked up, he didn't say anything. He just smiled softly, cautiously, as if still unsure if he was allowed to. Later, they strolled by the water, the boys asleep, back at the cabin, with Nancy and Linda. The lake shimmered under the setting sun, casting hues of gold and rose across its surface. Daniel reached for Alicia's hand, hesitating. She let him take it. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Daniel whispered, "I know I still have a long way to go, but I meant it when I said I want us to be a family again." Alicia looked ahead, letting the silence hold them both. The past didn't vanish. It walked beside them always. But in the weight of Daniel's words, in the sincerity etched into his face, she saw something more than regret. She saw growth. "You hurt me in a way I never thought possible," she said quietly, "but I've seen who you're trying to become. And the boys, they need that version of you. So do I." She turned to him, eyes soft but firm. "We'll try. We'll see if we can rebuild something better. But I won't pretend anymore, and I won't carry this alone." Daniel nodded, emotion catching in his throat. No more secrets, no more lies. They stood at the edge of the water, the wind gentle around them, and embraced, not with naivety, not with blind hope, but with earned effort. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that was enough. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster where love, betrayal, despair, and redemption collided under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Daniel and Alicia's journey reminds us that no matter how privileged or successful someone appears, true strength lies in accountability and the courage to heal. This story serves as a testament that even the deepest wounds can scar over with the salve of genuine remorse, steadfast commitment, and the pure innocence of children who deserve their parents' very best. If you found yourself caught up in the heartbreak and hope that wove through every chapter, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who might need a dose of inspiration, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories of life's most profound struggles and triumphs. Your engagement helps us continue bringing real stories that resonate with the human heart.